What changes do you think could help attract and retain more interpreters?
First thing's always awareness. People need to know about the role. They need to know that there are people in community, in medical settings, in legal settings who are specifically there to bridge the language barriers. Outside of that, people need to know about it as a career opportunity. And so I think this is a special place, a special way in which members of community, whether they be Spanish speaking, Haitian Creole, French, Polish, etc., can serve their communities and people who speak a same language in unique ways. And disproportionately, our migrant populations are pushed to the edges, pushed to the fringes. They don't receive the attention, the acknowledgement, the appreciation. Often they're treated as other in a number of ways. And medical interpreting is a great way for folks to provide service to folks who are disenfranchised, in particular by language, and improve health outcomes. Hospitals have a choice. They can provide better service to the community around them, or they can continue to do things as they have been done in just sort of this monolingual English kind of way. And increasingly, hospitals want to do the right thing and want to serve their communities and have language accessibility in a number of ways, whether we're talking about signage, interpreters, even access to language line. All of those things are important.
Great. Have you experienced delays or challenges due to interpreter unavailability? And if so, give an example.
I don't work in a medical setting, but where I have been involved in community health hubs, and that's where Hartford Healthcare and other community organizations have organized out in communities. So it could be at a soup kitchen, it could be at a shelter, it could be at a community space. And this is where we go out into community so the transportation bridge is shorter for the members of the population that might need to see us. So I have been there and I have served in an interpreter role, not in a medical capacity, but as a community interpreter. And that's made a lot of difference in terms of people being able to receive access and even just education about services. Because like attracts like. There are folks out in community who are new and don't understand about the services that are available or about the organizations that are here to serve them. Then letting one person know is a great way to let 10 people know. That information passes down. If I provide value for you, you're going to share that with other people you care about. So making sure that the distance that folks need to go to get to service is really critical. And I was there to remove the language distance, at least for Spanish speakers.
Okay. In your opinion, what are the main barriers preventing more people from entering this profession?
Well, yeah, back to awareness, and I would say awareness and probably confidence. I think there are a lot of folks out there who think my English or even my Spanish, my native language, my family's native language, isn't good enough to do this. And that's a fixed mindset that is unproductive ultimately. You can always improve your language. You can always improve your understanding of general articulation, whether it's English, Spanish. You learn a new language, learn a language that you're not immersed in. And how far you go in that is really up to you. And so I would say the limiting barriers are the awareness of the role and a fixed mindset that I'm not good enough to do that. Maybe a low confidence around your language ability. That's why it opens with a language proficiency assessment. I think you guys all had to take that in order to come into medical interpreting. And that's important, right? You want to know where you are with your languages, both English and, in your case, is Spanish, so that you know if you've got at this point what it takes or if you need to build your literacy. Those two things.
How do you collaborate with healthcare teams to ensure seamless communication and patient understanding?
Providing seamless communication has everything to do with transparency. If I'm interpreting for you and then I'm using a language that you don't understand, it's really critical that you trust that I'm saying things that you have said, that I'm being accurate in my interpretation. So when I have to step off script, when I have to mediate, when I have to step into the interpreter role, it's critical then that I'm transparent with the client as well, that they know, hey, I just said to the provider X and Y and Z in the interest of meeting your needs.
What are the associated risks and potential negative impacts on patient care?
Interpreting is certainly the lesser of this is decreasing risk. If you and I don't share a language in common, the likelihood that I'm going to receive the appropriate level of care or that I'm going to feel good about the care that I'm receiving is very low. So in every way that I can see, having medical interpreters present or having language services present in some fashion is critical to avoid risk, to avoid misprescription or misdiagnosis or me misunderstanding the instructions that you give me. Maybe you as a provider do everything correctly. Maybe you do hit the mark somehow despite our language barrier. But do I get what I need to do now in order to maintain my high levels of health and quality of life? Interpreting is a risk mitigation tool. More people live healthier lives, point blank, because language services are present. I guess the risks and dangers in the role are just understanding the tense, sometimes, nature of being in service to someone who needs care. Not everyone who shows up in the hospital is in their right mind. They may be running in the red in terms of their stress levels because they were just in an accident, because someone they care about is hurt, and medical interpreters need to provide that. You're in a situation where someone may desperately need an interpersonal connection, and yet your role as medical interpreter is to not be that, but to be the objective interpreter. And so the discernment of how to be what this person needs at what time, I think, is an area for risk. Sure. It may be difficult for you to function if someone is actively bleeding, if their damage is present, if they've got a head wound, or if they were in a fire. These can be things that I imagine would be very challenging for someone who's never experienced this before to work in that environment. But regardless, I would say that this patient is better off having an interpreter present than not. And if we truly lean into the humanity of the moment, what does this person need? The interpreter is going to show up and be present to the best of their ability. You have to know yourself as well. If something's going on that you are incapable of providing the service, you need to be honest with yourself, and you need to be upfront about that. A lower level of service is the best way for someone to get hurt, frankly. And so interpreters who feel as though they can't do the job should say that and speak to the provider to say someone else would be a better fit for this because I simply can't.
How does the shortage affect your daily work or patient care?
I'll try to interpret that to sort of my functioning community. Yeah. The shortage means this. Our communities are sicker. Point blank. There are people in our communities who are not getting the access to services that they need, whether it's medical, whether it's information, whether it's food, whether it's access to housing, because of that language barrier. And even not, the language barrier might be bridgeable, but they might not know about it. They might not know about community interpreters. They might not know that there are people next door to them or just down the street who can speak their language, or who can find someone who speaks their language and help them bridge their needs gaps between the resource and whatever their need is. So really, I come back to awareness in almost all cases. And it's the community health workers' job. That's the other sort of constituent group that I care for. Community health workers' job to connect with people in community so that the resources like interpreters can be directed that way to help this family get the care, get the attention, get the awareness that they need.
What do you think are the main reasons for the shortage of medical interpreters?
I'm going to keep ringing the awareness bell. People don't know about the role. You don't know about it. And that's why I'm so happy that NFA has this program for you all. I don't know that it would have occurred to you all. You might have thought, well, it's probably fine that families interpret for their parents or their kids. And in 90% of situations, it is. But when we're talking about what's legal, when we're talking about what's medical, when we're talking about things that have to do with personal health, we want to make sure that the interpreter is interpreting as objectively as possible. And the fact of the matter is, our family members have a bias. They have their thoughts about what's best for us. And that may not align with what we want. And so an objective interpreter is the best way for us to get the highest level of care. There just aren't as many medical interpreters as there need to be because people don't know about the role, because people may not realize the critical nature of the role and how important objectivity is as from an interpreter.
How do you ensure impartiality and maintain confidentiality?
The confidentiality piece, I think, is a lot easier. I don't talk about my clients to anyone except for the people who should have information about my clients. And as a matter of fact, in interpreting, that's very easy because I'm only talking between the provider and the patient about the patient's needs with both entities present. So for a provider to come to me after a session and say, do you think that this person would really want, is completely out of bounds. And it's my job to say that. So confidentiality and even talking about that scenario is probably out of bounds. What I would want to hear from you as a provider if we're out of session is some constructive feedback about how they would like to work with me. That's okay. That's what we can talk about outside of session. Confidentiality, you don't talk about your clients. As an interpreter, you don't do it. You stay in session, you do the work there. If anyone does come to you and try to get you to interpret sort of without the patient present, it's up to you in your professionalism to say, this is not an appropriate thing that you're asking of me. This is not what I do right here. I can't interpret for them when they're absent. And please don't ask this of me. The impartiality piece has a lot to do with us. That's an internal journey. Like, I recommend therapy for everyone. I think it's really important that we have an outlet for processing what's happened to us over the course of our lives. And so in that, we can find wholeness in our own existence. And then if I saw a patient as like representative of my mother, and I had this emotional baggage that I've developed with my mother about my mother, and I place it on this patient, that's going to create a problem. I may then be more inclined to be inaccurate and interpret in a way that doesn't quite align with what this person wants because I've got this emotional frame that I put the patient in. We got to process that stuff way in advance. I don't want to come into that situation where, oh, this person's just like my dad. This person reminds me so much of my dad that I'm emotionally impacted by their medical story right now. We got to do the advanced work to stay whole and present in the role.
Almost done. Do you feel confident communicating with people when an interpreter is not available? Why or why not?
I do. If folks speak Spanish, I'm comfortable speaking to them in Spanish, but also the nature of my work isn't medical. I'm not having to deal with someone's health story. And so I'm confident in my Spanish ability, but also in my ability to access other translating resources so that I can meet the needs of non-Spanish speakers. I've worked with folks who are just speech impaired, and we've used type tools, text tools to communicate effectively. And that just requires another level of patience. So my answer to your question is yes, I am confident without an interpreter present. But if we're dealing with matters of medical nature, of a legal nature, it's desperately important that there's a high level of accuracy, and that can only be attained through the use of approved interpreting language tools.
Okay, last question. How could healthcare professionals be better educated on working with interpreters?
Organizations need to analyze their data. They need to collect their demographic data. Who is it that we're serving? What are the languages that we're seeing? Where is there a need to address the language barrier? And so within that, the organizations that are then looking for talent or looking for service from interpreters need to message to their internal team, this is how you work with an interpreter. This is how you work with folks who are going to be only there to address the language barrier. You don't ask them for things. You don't ask this person their opinion. As a matter of fact, you look directly at your patient because that's who you're dealing with. This person is only there to bring down the language barrier. So whether it's the organization itself in getting that messaging to providers, or perhaps the interpreter or the interpreter organization providing that professional development for providers in the medical context which they're serving, to provide that professional development to providers to say, this is the way that you should deal with us and understand our role. And so it can really be present from both sources, but I think in particular it is the responsibility of the interpreting services to make themselves known. If you're an interpreter in the area, reaching out to the local hospitals, local facilities, shelters perhaps, to say, well, I'm a certified medical interpreter and I'd be happy to assist in your interpreting needs. So interpreters need to get the word out about them and the work that they do and how best to interface with them.
Okay, that's everything. That's all the questions. You did a great job.
Well, happy to do it. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and we'll see you both in about an hour and a half.
Oh yeah.
See you about an hour and a half.
An hour and a half.
Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.